Okay, it looks like we're live, and it looks like hopefully this is going upstream to Vimeo. So we did it.
Yay!
We're a little bit late, but we did it. Okay.
We did.
Can't comments to some destinations. Can't post comments. Okay. All right. We made it.
The broadcast is live. The sign just came up.
Right. Cool. And that's on Vimeo?
It just came up on the StreamYard box here. It just showed me something. So I'm on StreamYard. I don't have both things going at once. I'm not sophisticated enough for that.
Oh, I can see us on Vimeo.
Okay.
This is great. All right.
Good morning, everybody. Or good afternoon for most people. It's still sort of morning here. Are people filing in?
On no chat. What do we have for chat here?
All right.
Enable chat.
I'm going to grab a cup of water while we wait. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. I think so, but now I've got like 2 audio sources. This is crazy. Hey, man.
Hey, you're on YouTube also.
Well, I'm on YouTube as well, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that about?
I think somebody sent me a text saying that the chat on YouTube spelled like with a U tube was going and that people were there and chatting already and waiting for us. And
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Is Thor at the door sorting everything out for us? You're almost purple, Robert. Something funny is going on. What's happening?
No. Hold on. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. So we were streaming simultaneously on YouTube. Apparently we're on YouTube. And we were streaming on Vimeo, but I was hearing the show on Vimeo. So I was hearing you, I was hearing me, and then I was hearing Steve. It was like a bit too much there for a second. All right, so I mean, it looks like fucking YouTube is allowing me back. The whole thing with YouTube is so weird.
It's weird.
And so, I apologize because theoretically I'm no longer allowed there, for at least for another week. But these bans don't seem to hold up for the entirety of your time.
Well, the truth is that I actually work for YouTube, and since you decided to have me on, they decided to allow the stream to go, right? So everybody gets banned except for the people who work for YouTube. Like that's been our criticism of Tim, maybe, or whatever, right? But so let's just go with that I work for YouTube.
So when did you become aware of your alternate life? When did that happen?
Well, I think I became aware of my alternate life when I was really little, but I didn't understand it as such. And it's becoming increasingly apparent the further I get, the further down the road we go, right? But I guess the moment of clarity came when I was at the Topanga Plaza one day and I was going down the escalator and I was also coming up the escalator towards myself. And I recognized then that we were in the purple.
In the purple. So
like one reality is red and one is blue. We're in that sort of condensed space between where there's the purple line, right?
So I just want to, welcome everybody to today's show. It's a little choppy. The time thing is off, and but I'm glad that Emily is here because we were going to do this later today, and I thought it would be better if we just did it live now, and it worked out pretty well. But it's been an interesting experience in Vimeo, and I'm going to continue to like mine Vimeo, because I'm not really crazy about being yo-yoed by YouTube.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be upfront, and I don't care if the AI or the bots, pick it up, or YouTube picks it up, whatever. But the thing that really is kind of mind blowing, when you and I talked about this, is that my views on Vimeo, I have less viewers on Vimeo, but more views than on YouTube. So, one of the things that, we've talked about, and I would say that this probably extends to you too, that you're not, I'm not alone in this, in that this platform throttles people, it throttles views, it throttles subscriptions. It's kind of a dirty partnership.
Yeah.
It's like your friend with benefit that you regret going back to kind of again and again and again, but they're there. It's easy. But there's always some kind of consequence to pay for it.
The YouTube thing is incredibly weird, right? Like it's one of these things, like for me, with everything that we're dealing with right now, I've chosen to take much less of a pro or anti position than most people have on a lot of topics, simply because I'm trying to understand how this system works. And I find when I stay, even if I have emotions that go one or the other ways, when I try and keep myself in neutral as analyzing it, I get a better read on what's actually going on. So one of the things that I've noticed from YouTube, and this doesn't, when I'm talking about this, I'm just talking about clearly from an analytical standpoint, like not that I carry, that I have an investment in something one way or the other. But what's odd to me is that I've watched the thing happen, obviously, where you put your show up, and just within an hour or two after putting it up, you see the counts are very high, and then a few hours later it's lower than it was earlier, which doesn't make any sense because that was a nearer time to release. So I've watched that happen. But what I've also noticed is that shows that get almost no views, I get the highest amount of like emails and like interaction around. That doesn't make sense to me, right? So like I can have a show that may only get 400 views, but I'll get 14, 15 emails from people about the show, right? And then other shows that get thousands and thousands of views, I get no interaction on, right? And based on how slowly, now, and when I say this doesn't come from a lack of appreciation for the viewers I have, but based on how little subscribers I have on YouTube and how slowly my YouTube channel is growing, the number of patrons I have percentage-wise is very good, right? I feel very fortunate that way, but I see sometimes like people that have like way more subscribers and stuff on YouTube and like far fewer patrons. And I'm like, something isn't right here. Either I'm getting more views on YouTube than I know about, right? Which is possible. I also noticed that there are certain kinds of shows that it seems that the views are really suppressed on, and it's not the ones that you would think. It's not the ones that about politics, and it's not the ones about the medical situation, right? It tends to be the ones where there's a level of decode going on that really hints at how the system actually works. And I think YouTube is some kind of interdimensional technology. Like if you watched Man in the High Castle, the whole story is circled around these films that are being passed back and forth across reality. And I think something like that is happening with YouTube, right? And so if there's information that the other side isn't supposed to know, right, then that will be suppressed or blocked or banned, and they let people think it's about vaccine stuff or politics or whatever kind of thing, because creates a lot of chaos and noise and a lot of distraction from what the controversial topics actually are, right? And so I'm into some weird stuff where like I'm noticing genetic and chemical processes mirroring financial and technological processes in the way that things are being suppressed or amplified and whatnot. And I think this is all part of it, and it doesn't make sense. And yes, I agree with you. Probably the numbers that you're getting on Vimeo are closer to the truth. And with that said, we should see your views rise to the 3, 4, or 5,000 per show on a daily basis in the next couple of weeks. And I think we will, and you'll have a better read of how far your material is actually circulating.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, it's already proven to be that. I mean, I've had anywhere between, I don't know, 80 to 100 people during the live streams, and getting 1,300 views.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, that's partially because, yeah, I mean, there are those 80 to 90 people, but there are views that are after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, people are finding it. And so, it really gets this whole picture that reality is augmented, right? It is totally augmented. The numbers are augmented. What's being shown is augmented. What's not being shown is augmented. I'm supposed to be suspended for 2 weeks. It's actually less than 2 weeks. That's augmented. It's all augmented. And it's really difficult for people to get their footing with reality now. Mm-hmm. And even astrologically, the Earth-related planets, like or the Earth-related signs, you have Taurus, and you've got Uranus. And Mars is going away. It's going to be in Gemini soon. But you have Uranus and Taurus, which theoretically with the ground and terra firma and the Earth, which really I think Taurus is the sign of. I think Taurus is the sign of the Earth. Mm-hmm. You've got Uranus, and it's really unstable. Like, terra firma, 3D, theoretically, the material plane is really unstable, whether it's money, whether it's the weather, and whether it's, again, augmented or modified, right? So that's going on. And then we have Pluto and Capricorn, which we're in this really deep cycle of transforming sort of the modern culture or the paradigm. And that's really unstable because we're going through these death throes. So, this idea of reality is really, really challenging based on, physical reality. Meanwhile, we've got all this air going on. We've got the true node in Gemini, Saturn in Aquarius, Jupiter in Aquarius. So that stuff can seem more real. Like the idea space or the meme space or the technosphere, that stuff seems to seem more real than this other thing that's going on.
Yeah, and actually, just your point is very interesting. I don't know if you know this, but just in the last week or so, the iPhone 12, which has augmented reality features, was released, right? And so the technology and the augmentation is no longer strictly coming at us through our computer screens, right? There's literally a digital overlay in our reality that you're going to be able to pick up on and experience through your phone, right? So basically, like, Pokemon Go has gone live for the broader reality, not just the people who are actively aware that they're playing the game.
Yeah.
So all of these things layered on top of each other, we are in a totally new world. I mean, like, it seems like something has shifted even just this week, right? Whatever's going on with the Federal Reserve System crashing and the strange way that cryptos are rising and falling. And all of a sudden today, like, I wake up and I'm looking at, like, we have some sort of like parliamentary system as part of our government now all of a sudden. Did you see this? Like, they're talking about there's a parliamentary rule as to why Joe Biden can't raise the minimum wage to $15.
I saw that. Where did that come from?
Right. And I know that that's not been a thing because I've had conversations with my father, who has a very different idea about the way the world should be run or whatever than I do. He wishes we had a parliamentary system. Right. So why would we have had a conversation about him wanting a parliamentary system if we already had my dad's a political science teacher. Right. So all of a sudden today, there's like several news stories on Zero Hedge alone. So where else about how there's a parliamentarian who's going to stop there from being, a $15 minimum, $15 an hour minimum wage. Right. I'm like, okay, so now we're like back in colonial times where we're ruled by the crown and we're in parliament. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, well, what's interesting about parliamentary rules. So a lot of people don't understand this about the UK government or the government in England. When a certain party is in power, whether it's Labour or whether it's the Conservative Party or the Tories, they're in power, right? It is not about sharing power. So if Labour is in power, that means that they really get to run the show.
Yeah.
And you could have dissenting voices and people can stand up in their wigs and shit and give very dramatic speeches. But at the end of the day, whoever is kind of in control of that government, one of those parties, it's going to be their platform for however long that party and that person representing that party stays in power. Now, if you look at what's happened here, we've got theoretically, and again, it's all theoretical at this point, we got a Democratic president,
Mm-hmm.
we have a Democratic House, and ostensibly we have a Democratic Senate with Kamala Harris being the deciding vote. So, and then you could even make a case that the Supreme Court, by their recent rulings, seems like they're potentially way more Democratic than we might have thought they would. Not me personally, but other people. So now you take a look. You've got, technically speaking, a Democratic SCOTUS, a Democratic Senate, a Democratic House, and a Democratic president. What do you have there? You've got a parliamentary system.
Yep. And so absolutely. And on top of that, we also have a Democratic media, a Democratic social media, right, kind of thing. And so if we think of, that journalism has always been considered like the fourth estate or the fifth estate, that it's there to check the others, right?
Yep.
So the parliamentary system has also extended beyond government into what observes, comments on, and critiques government, right? So yeah, this seems like the appropriate time to just, remember like when they, years ago they started, it happened a long time ago, but I only started paying attention to politics probably 20 years ago. And I noticed that they're constantly referring to this country as a democracy, right? Which it's not, but they've said it enough times that everybody now believes we live in a democracy.
Right.
So all they have to do is start talking about parliamentary processes enough times that in 20 years, people won't even question how we moved from being whatever we were before to a parliamentary, to a split system kind of thing. So this is, there's, the way that they're sliding in it is interesting. It's not the first word in the title of these articles. It comes in like the fifth or sixth word is parliamentary, right? And there's a few articles up here and there, and then it's going to become increasingly more over time, just like they did with the replacement of republic with democracy.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I wonder where Noahide law fits in on all this, and where at some point we're just gonna trash whatever kind of law that's left over from Black's Law Dictionary, and we just move it to straight Noahide law. I think that's probably going to happen, and it may happen under the guise of calling it something else. Like they're not going to come out and say this is Noahide law, but it could be kind of a new tablet or a new template based on stakeholder, right? Stakeholder equity and fairness. And next thing you know, now we're dealing with Noahide law commands. So it's a really bizarre time. It's a very, very bizarre time. And again, I think it's hard for people to wrap their head around anything that's got any kind of solidity, with the exception of this, technosphere and idea space, which seems to be very, very, very active and able to be impregnated by any number of strange ideas or strange themes. Did you see Rand Paul yesterday with Rachel Levine?
Yeah.
Richard Levine. I'll tell you what was the thing that was really bizarre about it wasn't the fact that he was bringing up like really intense points. Like you're going to let kids make up their minds and choose their sex, and you're going to provide genital mutilation. You're going to provide all the drugs and the hormones that go along with that. It was her response.
It was so weird, wasn't it? It was really weird.
It was so robotic. It was just bizarre.
Well, I think two things. I think first of all, are you under arrest and you're like continuing to assert your Fifth Amendment privileges, right? The way she was just repeating the same thing in every way. So there was that. And then the other thing was, and I think you and I have talked about this. I've certainly talked about this with other people as well, that the transgender stuff is part of the move towards transhumanism, right? like the chemicals, the chemical reprogramming of the human genetic code that is happening through some of these drugs, right, are literally machine learning types of things, right? And so it wouldn't surprise, I mean, so we're dealing with like, first of all, like that, repetitive response you get when somebody's in trouble or thinks they're in trouble, right? And then we're also getting this demonstration of robotics where like the robots can do the tasks that they're programmed to do, but they have not quite taken on the same level of sentience or novelty, ability for surprise, or coming up with a unique response to a problem or whatever that humans have, right? So both things were on display. So that was a weird, an odd.
Well, she was robotic. I mean, you're talking about a theoretically living testament to a human becoming this sort of transmogrified and transmutated entity and becoming much more robot-like.
Yeah.
And the transition state being that vehicle for that. And I think that's a brilliant insight, because that's exactly what she displayed, or he just, I don't know where we are with Richard.
Like, this is like, just to me, the idea, and me, like I know all sorts of people of all types of stripes, and I have lots of friends I don't have a problem with whatever people are, right? But the idea that this is what they want to put forward when they're saying that they want to bring unity and they want to tamp things down, we live in a fucking clown show. This is an intelligence test that we're living in right now, right? And they've made it so plainly obvious that reality is fake, and we're going to talk about some of that today. I think, I think we'll talk about some things that are highly fake and some things that are highly real. But reality is, this thing that we're being presented is so fake, right, that if you can't go, this is just bonkers, I'm walking away from this, then whatever you fucking get, you deserve.
But when you walk away from it, then where do you go? And I think this is really the big question, because I was on a message board, it was yesterday, and somebody said, how do I create my own reality? Because I'm tired of this one. And I think number one, it's a valid question. But number two, what does that look like? At what point do you just become so solipsistic that nothing else really exists? And what kind of life is that like? I mean, are you so dialed out that everybody else around you just disappears and fades away? And where are the, the connecting dots and the nodal points with a reality like that?
So I think that the two things that go on in the upper echelons of secret societies are learning to travel between realities and also learning to create them yourself, right? And so, maybe at a time this information was secreted or however the right way to say the word, because they were
occulted would be the word,
right? Yeah. Occulted, because they recognized that everybody was not mature enough to handle that. And then at a certain point, it definitely totally got corrupted to the point where people were not just keeping the information to themselves, but they were actively using the information that they knew to control other people who didn't have that information. And that's really where the problem comes in, right?
Right.
Sometimes we don't tell people things because they're not ready to handle it. But if we then also use that information to control them, that's really where the problem comes in. And so these two ideas, though, like, let's separate them out from the secret societies for a bit and go, okay, the ability to travel between realities or dimensions or times or however you see that, and then the ability to create realities, right? And if you look at the I don't know how to say it, but like the way a Masonic floor is drawn, it also seems to map out to like reality creation. Like, I've done a lot of looking into the geometry of the Masonic floor, right? And this ability to sort of create separated spaces. And it's kind of interesting. So right now, that's where like a lot of my attention has gone to, is like, okay, so I think what it is first is learning to travel, learning to move between realities. And then once you understand how realities work than the beginning to be able to create your own. But all of this is very, requires a certain amount of maturity and integrity to not become the people that we claim to we're wanting to revolt against and overthrow here. And I'm not talking about overthrowing governments, because I think that's a sham for covering up what's really going on here on a certain level. But I think the first thing is to really learn how to move between spaces yourself. And whether that starts with like something as simple as, have you had, I'm sure, well, you've never worn the mask, right? You don't wear the mask. But for some of us who have worn the mask, like I've had this situation occur where I go into a store without a mask on and nobody says anything. And then suddenly I realize I'm not wearing a mask. And at the moment I realize I'm not wearing a mask, someone will say, ma'am, you need to put your mask on.
Right. I get that. Yeah.
Idea of like piloting your way through the dimensions with your intent without being so distracted.
Yeah. So to your point, like I eventually migrated and wound up in a place where I don't have to wear a mask.
Yes, great. Yeah.
I don't have to go to a job that requires me to wear a mask. So in some ways I have created a version of my own reality. So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And I want to back that point up, because I have met other people in this reality that are similar. So it's not like I'm alone. I congregate with them. We talk, we meet, we hang out. I'm meeting more people like that. And I'm not, I don't think it's so disparate from their creating their own reality. But we've all made choices to be in a place where I didn't know that this place was going to be, more user-friendly in terms of my experience without a mask. But I knew that I didn't want to be in the place that I was before. Right. Because I could see where that place was going. And that place is Austin. And it's the pink prison. It's the rainbow prison. But to your point, I think that that's true.
Right.
And there's some truth to that. And so whatever my aggregate thoughts were, my intentions, my beliefs, my spirit, it brought me to a place where, guess what? My reality kind of lines up with who I am.
Yeah. And so, and even in a place as crazy and totally communist as Los Angeles is at this point, on a certain level, I've created that as well. I have a huge social life here of people who don't want to wear the mask. So whatever we do, we're doing it without that. Like sometimes you may have to pass a door with it or whatever. But even today, I took Laura's car to get fixed, right? And I'm sitting in there, and I walk in. He's not wearing a mask. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to put it on. He's not wearing a mask. I'm not putting it on. And by the end of the time he was working on my car, we totally talked about conspiracies, the hoaxes, everything. And he's like, what about aliens, right? So we were already to aliens, right? And so, but this is the person I've known for a couple of years, and not until this time was I aware that he had an alternate view of reality as well. So my desire to live in a reality of my choosing, and yet the way in which I'm approaching that is naturally drawing those people to me without me having to like make a huge deal about it, right? And I actually feel that's our best strategy for this time. Like this morning, you happened to say when we were in a private conversation that I have a strategic filter that has benefited me in some circumstances or in a lot of circumstances. And I was thinking about that while I was driving, and I was like thinking, well, it isn't really a filter. It just coincided there was a time when I was very resistant and very anti things and whatever. But whatever has happened with censorship and all that kind of stuff seems to coincide with a shift in my interests from raging against the machine to dimensional and time travel and understanding the process by which that works. And so that seems to have allowed me somehow to encode what I'm saying in a way. And I don't know why that is, but I was really thinking about it because I say some crazy shit. I say some of the weirder things that I think people have listened to anyone say and still not been like, that person is totally fucking nuts. Although they might think I'm totally nuts, right? But my interests changed seemingly either a little ahead of or at the same time that went, and that has served me well. My focus is on learning about moving between realities and how to create them and being integrous while I do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that you can call that a filter, but it's just where my evolution happened. And I think that, I think that that maybe that's something hopefully I can continue to grow with and maybe help other people learn how to do too, where you can speak your truth and also not constantly be locked in a battle with the system that isn't of your choosing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're kind of, I wouldn't say you're a pioneer in that way, but you're out on an edge that other people maybe are not for a variety of reasons. And I think some of that, again, has to do with your persona, your intent, your evolution. Number one, you're single. Well, you're not single. You have a partner, but you don't have kids.
No children. Yeah.
And again, this is all intentional. You've chosen to be more independent from other external structures, and doing this and some other things as well. There are other people who have these encumbrances where it's harder. It's harder for them to create their so-called reality. They have to, like, there was a woman in chat. She just said that her child has to wear a mask at school, even with sports, 5 hours a day. Right. So one could make a case that, well, you could create a different reality for your children by pulling them out of school.
Right.
And by homeschooling them, and then by finding other people who are doing the same thing. But then there are consequences that line up with that. And those consequences generally tend to be social or economic or some form of both. And those are not insurmountable, by the way. They're not insurmountable, but they take a lot more. There's more gravity. There's kind of more pressure with those situations. But what would you say to somebody like that who has those kinds of encumbrances?
So yeah, those are challenges that I don't have. And so I'm always like, I sometimes get mad at people who say, well, just create your own reality. I'm like, well, wait a second. So-and-so has 5 children to feed and blah, 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 blah. Because you and I, we have people we know in common who just sometimes say things like that, right? Like, create your own reality. So I fully acknowledge that I have I have certain privileges my father's been very generous with me. That's a lot. And I haven't had to fight for some of the same things that other people have had to. So that has put me in a position to be able to do some things and take some chances that other people don't. And I fully acknowledge that. I think also not having kids. And then there's 2 other things I think that sort of have helped me through this. And maybe this will lead to the answer. And one of them is the fact that I basically, got kicked out of society based on my drug use, right? Like I was off. I lost any credibility with general people, right? So there was no reputation or political or social standing or people respecting me or thinking I take care of things to maintain. Like I was out of it, right? And then the other thing is my gymnastics training, which helps. So I was really good on beam, right? I was good on beam and I was good on bars. And the thing about beam is, while everything else, all the chaos is going on around you, you have 4 inches and you need to stay on it, right? And so you can become kind of singly focused on that. And then with bars, you're moving back and forth between basically 2 separate but connected realities, right? And having to manage that space between them appropriately, right? So I think those things have helped me. But I think that we have to, people like me, who have the ability to go out ahead of time and map out that space, it should be a main priority of ours to help the people that you're talking about that honestly do want to do that, right? That honestly do want to be involved and focused on creating a better situation. Like when we're staking out these new places, learning to travel, learning to create realities, we need to consider those people and their children in what we're doing and not just make it a free for all for people who have nothing that they're tethered to, right? Like we really have to keep that in mind. And Some of my greatest supporters in my journey have been people like that. So they're at the top of my list, and they're not forgotten in this. And I don't think it's a fair answer to just say, well, I created my own reality. Why don't you? You know, like I don't. So I think it's up to us who have maybe some extra degrees of freedom based on not having families and children and things like that to really be helpful in creating a better reality for said children.
Right. I would agree with that. So there's this movie by David Mamet called Red Belt. Mm-hmm. And have you ever seen it by any chance?
No.
It's with Tim, what's his name? The Family Guy.
Tim, I know who you're talking about. His name's on the tip of my
Tool Time. Tim what's Tim Allen. Tim Allen's in it.
Yeah.
He plays a total scumbag. And I think David Mamet was really interested in MMA. And do you know the actor, what's his name? Chiwetel Ejiofor. Do you know him?
No, but that's a great name.
Yeah. He was in that, I think that movie Fancy Boots or whatever it's called, or
Glitter Boots.
What is it?
Is there a movie called Glitter Boots?
It's called Fancy. Anyway, he's a really good actor. Really, really good actor. He was in the film version of Firefly. Did you ever see that? The Josh Whedon movie? Anyway, so he plays this guy he's a martial artist, and he's an MMA guy. And the theme of the movie is that even when you're in a situation where it looks like you can't get out of it, mm-hmm. there's always an out.
Always get out.
There's always an out. And that is like the theme. I mean, and he has to practice this one move because essentially he gets blackmailed. It's kind of a weak David Mamet film, but he gets blackmailed into going back into the MMA circuit. And Tim Allen is the guy that blackmails him. And he has to learn this one move where he has to go up with his feet over one of the posts and then flip and then turn and get out of this deadly pin. It's the only move that'll do it. Right. And there's a sub theme in there about a woman who's been raped and mugged and raped, and she comes to him to study. And so like that's her way out. She finds somebody to help her. Yep. But he's the one that has to do it. And I think that there's some truth to that film, in that there's always a way out. There's always one, maybe more, but we get really locked in with our perception about how, it's either this or that or this or that. And we almost need to be retrained sometimes.
Yeah.
To see our situation in a different kind of way. And then for me, even when I've done that, I can even sense my inner resistance. Like, oh, well, it's got to be this way or that way. Why, And it's like, well, I feel like I've been trained to have those kinds of limited options. Yeah. And that's not to say that there aren't things that people have holding back. One of the things that came up in chat is that money, mm-hmm. Money's resources. And if you have a lot of money, mm-hmm. it's easier to move about and do things and make changes. And there's some truth to that, but there's also like that runs out. Like money will run out. And unless you have an endless supply of money, so you don't have to do anything and make all the wonderful changes in your life that you can make, you're still going to come to a point where you're going to have to make some adjustments and re-rack your relationship with so-called reality.
Yeah. So 2 things. I want to talk about the move first, and then I'll talk about the money aspect of it. So I'm very familiar. I've not seen the movie, but I'm very familiar metaphorically and literally and figuratively with the kind of moves that you're talking about, right? And so these would be moves that in gymnastics are called tricks with blind landings. You have to trust that you are going to be able to reorient yourself, find yourself wherever you may land in order to make the landing, right? So when you do a front flip on the beam, you cannot see the floor before you have to put your feet down on it, right? with certain, any skills that have like a front exit to them, you're not going to be able to see the ground. So you're largely having to learn air awareness and having a certain sense of like faith, especially in the beginning when you're moving it, that like you're where you think you are and that you're going to be able to land it. Or in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think they had to jump across to land on a ledge that they couldn't see from the spot that they were jumping from, because it was like across some energetic barrier or some reality, right? So they knew it was there, but they couldn't see it. So they had to jump and really trust that they were going to land safely. So that's the kind of move that you're talking about right there, right? Where your eyes are going to be taken off of your landing point for a bit. You're going to have to, through your own will, force, trust, all of that kind of stuff, make the leap anyway. And then to what you said about money, absolutely. I mean, I certainly don't have a lot of money. Most of my freedom has come from the fact that I've been able to live places for free, so not have that sort of income, that rent, that situation. So it's given me a degree of freedom, but I certainly don't have enough money to buy my way out of a situation. And I think the kind of freedom that people like you and I and everyone here in the chat are going for isn't a kind of freedom that can be bought anyway. Like literally Bill Gates lives in a hell of his own creation. Right?
66,000 square foot hell.
Right.
But his own creation.
Right. The reason he is doing what he is doing is because no matter how much money he hasn't been able to buy the kind of freedom he's looking for. And so it's become inverted. And instead he's controlling the little fiefdom that he has created. Right. Kind of thing. So this true freedom, like one of the freest people I know, and one of the people I admire the most, and I'm just constantly fascinated by his ability to be creative and come up with unique solutions to things and whatever, does not have a lot of money and doesn't really consider money for in almost anything he does other than the bare survival of food and place to live and all of that kind of stuff, right? So, and then I also know people who have tons of money and they're worried about the same shit you and I are, right? So the kind of freedom that we're looking for, money doesn't buy anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, one can't discount the metaphysical option of salvation, right? I mean, I think that there's really a there. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people scoff over this idea that you can be saved and you can live your life through a higher purpose, through this Christ energy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people scoff at it, and I don't think they should. I think that's actually quite real.
Totally.
And people have had their lives completely changed. I've seen people do 180-degree changes.
I did that. Yeah.
With their lives, and now they're living. It's not just a better life, but they're living with a sense of faith in a way that other humans just don't have. And I think in a lot of ways, that's really what's missing from the big picture now. We've been decoupled from eminence and transcendence, and we're living in this kind of fake science-based world where there really is no kind of transcendent factor. There is no living gnosis. There is no real transformation, and so we're in this weird kind of holodeck of pain and suffering and blame. Mm-hmm. and a lot of this because we become decoupled from, and I'm not a huge church person. I'm not a big fan of churches, but there's something to be said for living within kind of a code, like a religious or sacred code, because when you do it and you do it consciously, not out of just following orders, they become the building blocks of a person's life. And for all the chaos that I think we can play with and be creative with, at another level, we need some kind of coherent and social order. We don't necessarily need it from the government. Mm-hmm. In fact, we don't need it from the government at all. But now we're seeing the outgrowth of people being decoupled from transcendence and the conscious application of these kinds of sacred sorts of rules and laws that allow us to have a coherent society where we're not running around and accusing people of the pettiest of offenses. And we've lost that.
I think that what your point about salvation is good. And even though I guess maybe I would phrase it differently, not because I'm anti the idea of salvation, I just wasn't raised with religion. So terms that tend to invoke that are just not part of my vocabulary. But at the very moment that I decided I was ready to stop doing meth, right? The way that I term it is I made an agreement with the universe that if I would never do meth again, and I wanted answers about my life. I wanted to understand what was going on here. And I haven't done meth, and I have gotten answers. And it's to the point now where I'm in such a working relationship with whatever it is I'm connected to, universe, God, however people seem to, that like I ask questions here on shows, and the universe spits out answers as soon as I get off, right? Like I'm understanding what I wanted to understand. And so that is real. That is true. I was a fucking mess. Every single one of you out there would not have talked to me 6 years ago. I had crap all over my face from picking it and having Morgellons. It was both. I was, I was never like a thief or anything like that, but I couldn't show up. I didn't do the things I said I was going to. I had all of these same kinds of interesting thoughts and ideas that I had now, but I couldn't string a sentence together. So nobody would, certainly listen to me talk about stuff or whatnot. And, I didn't know what there was no guarantee when I made that commitment that I would be having a life like I have now, but I did it with trust and faith that somehow I would be taken care of. And to me, taken care of meant something particular to me, which was what I wanted to understand, what had happened to me in my life and whatnot. And I'd say that I have been given more than I ever could have asked for. Right. And so there is something to that. At a certain point, we have to trust that if we make an integrous and truthful decision for ourselves, we will be taken care of. And if that makes me a religious person or whatever, then so charged, whatever. But I think what you're saying is really important. And I think there is that the lack of the way that has been systematically removed from our realm and the reality and stuff does create this chaos situation we're in now, where you have people parked outside of businesses reporting on people who go in there without masks and stuff like that. This is so stupid. It's
right. Because they're desperately trying to create a new order. Mm-hmm. And because the chaos in their lives and the chaos in the world is overwhelming to them. But there's a higher order that's available to them. They don't understand that, though. Mm-hmm. And so they're trying to create this new order out of what's happening. Yeah. And obviously there's a feedback loop in there somewhere that they're getting something positive from, either from their peer group or some kind of weird dopamine hit that's in their head because they think they're doing the right thing. Or the fact that they enjoy torturing people, and there's kind of another hit off of that because there's some of that in there too. But we're in a very precarious place on a collective level in that regard. But I do think, to your point, because so many things are kind of in play and in motion, that there are also interesting things happening. And you and I have been talking about some of your kind of breakthroughs and the things that you have stumbled upon over the last couple of weeks. And we were talking about this, doing the show. It was 2 days ago, and we had started to talk about gymnastics. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how we got on the subject of gymnastics. We were talking about gymnastics again. And then I think you made some kind of a comment about something happening there, or there was something, that you thought was going to break, and then 2 days later, this guy who was connected to Larry Nassar supposedly killed himself. Mm-hmm. I heard that on the radio. I was in the parking lot of HEB. I'm like, whoa. And the way that they said it, though, is that I couldn't figure out if it was Larry Nassar that had killed himself or was this guy that had killed himself. It was really weird how the news spot was written. So you want to get into that? You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So, I'm not a genius or anything. I just happen to be good at sniffing out pattern recognition. And, I pay a lot of attention to sports, tennis and gymnastics in particular, but you can probably do this with other sports as well. I obviously have the personal connection to gymnastics. And what I have been watching both last fall and into the spring this year with tennis, but I'm going to shift to just really talking about gymnastics right now. this spring with gymnastics and the return of NC2A competition is this fetishizing, ritualizing of the mask kind of thing, right? And I'm watching. We've been watching it for a couple of years, but now it's becoming it's becoming symbolized in a way that everybody should be able to see it, right? With these gymnasts and this masking that's going on and this sort of acknowledgement of their slavery. And I literally watched a gymnastics meet a few weeks ago where when you are competing on vault or bars, there's an area that is fenced off for the girls to wait. The girl who's performing and the coach will be out here, and then when they're done with their thing, they wait here, right? So but it literally said on the wall, there was a piece of paper that said something like vault corral or vault pen or something like that. Not like vault waiting area, not anything like that. Literally corral, right? This is for animals, right? And meanwhile, you have these girls with the masks over their faces that they've decorated with all this glitter with their team's thing on it and stuff like that, right? And we're stories about the mask, and it's fucking we all are recognizing we're having to wear masks. Can we just have a sporting event where at least it's not talked about? We all see the people are wearing masks and whatever, right? So I started to watch this and whatnot. But over the last couple of weeks, the other thing that's happened is we're back into the thing where UCLA I've been watching UCLA gymnastics and floor routines since I was very little. The old UCLA coach was my ballet teacher and whatever, right? And for years, I loved this and nobody cared. But over the last 5 years, something has happened where this has become the talk of town, UCLA gymnastics meets, right? And so I think that this is part of this move from the Hollywood thing is over. The Hollywood thing is basically over. And the big sports, they're over, right? Football is over. You've been talking about that for years. But what we have now is a popularization on a certain level of what were always considered kind of the secondary sports, being gymnastics, tennis, and whatnot. But none of this is happening, in my opinion, at least with gymnastics, while college gymnastics is at its best. It's become very entertaining. It's more show than substance in a lot of times. So you have these floor routines that go viral. And of course, this year, first it was Nia Dennis and then it was Marzetta Frazier. They both happen to be Black, right? But this is wound into this whole commentary about Black History Month, right? Black History Month and, Michelle Obama tweeting Nia Dennis's floor routine and whatnot. And then this very weird thing I watched last week so Marzetta Frazier from UCLA has a new floor routine to a Janet Jackson music, right? Mm-hmm. And so after she performed it, it went viral. And then at the next weekend's meet, they're showing on the TV, and it was weird and very disorienting. Marzetta Frazier talking on FaceTime to Janet Jackson, who's wearing a mask, to talk to her on the phone, mm-hmm. right? So Marzetta Frazier is not wearing a mask. Janet Jackson is wearing a mask. But the whole thing is psychedelic and confusing because you're looking at it on the TV screen and you can see each of their phones and that you can see in the corner the icon of the other person they're talking to. So there's 6 images of it was really weird, right?
So it was kind of like augmented reality.
Augmented reality, and you have Marzetta Frazier doing Janet Jackson's dance moves in her floor routine. Janet Jackson complimenting her on said dance moves and then asking for lessons from Marzetta Frazier on how to do some of those moves.
Wow.
Right? And I'm like, what the fuck? There's a changing of the guard going on here in some ways from Hollywood celebrities to these athletes who have been through, in this case, gymnastics, right? We've talked about what's happened. I'm going to try. I've had so many thoughts this morning about this. I'm going to try and string this together in a way that makes sense. But gymnastics is now openly in the spotlight as what we used to think of about Hollywood with all of the improprieties and pedophilia and scandals and all of that kind of stuff. That now exists in the gymnastics realm, right? And you have now these college gymnasts becoming very, very famous, most of whom were involved in this USA Gymnastics Larry Nassar scenario. And now they if you notice the Me Too shit, started right after the Larry Nassar shit. And they drafted all the gymnasts into the Me Too shit, which has now morphed into all of the gymnasts being like, there's no gymnastics meet ever now without somebody talking about how they're pro Black Lives Matter, or that they have an LGBTQ pride meet and they have masks that say Black Lives Matter or that are rainbow or whatever, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, well, wait a second. So they're allowed to do this. What if somebody doesn't want to wear the mask? Right? Would they? And they're talking about how great it is that the NC2A and the college coaches are supporting their freedom of expression and supporting Black Lives Matter. Well, what if they want to wear something on their mask that says this is bullshit? I don't want to wear this. Right? When I was in college gymnastics, I was forced to wear bows in my hair. I fucking hate.
I can't imagine you with bows in your hair.
I had there was no choice. And so then you have a situation where you have someone competing in the meet wearing something that they don't feel forget about the discomfort of wearing a leotard anyway. That's one I got over when I'm 6. But through my whole life, I didn't wear bows. And now when I'm 18 and I'm an adult, you're asking me to wear a bow because everybody else is. So you have these teams being forced into whatever, condoning Black lives, however, whatever they think, I don't care. If that's how they really feel, wonderful, right? But you have this sort of same kind of both physical and ideological slavery that we watch in Hollywood, right?
Right.
And so, and they're now they're the empowered women of the UCLA gymnastics team who are out there like Black Lives Matter. Right? These people have no idea that the same people who have conscripted them into this fame that they think that they're experiencing now that they think is natural, right, are pedophiles, right? Mm-hmm. And that where this is all going. So I talked about this when you first interviewed me years back, right? That what we were watching with USA Gymnastics is like a trial run for how it's going to go with the government, right? Kind of thing. Like it parallels one-to-one the USA Gymnastics situation. USA Gymnastics is a mini government within our country, right? They have their own little fiefdom, right? And they've been going through the same things that have happened when our governments, when things like, we've had Dennis Hastert. We obviously know that a good portion of the politicians or pedophiles are involved in improprieties or whatever, but there's always one or two that's sort of scapegoat and all this stuff around them. This looks exactly like that, right? Like Nassar is like Sandusky's the guy, or whatever the guy was at Penn State, and Gettert is like Epstein, right? Gettert has, so the thing that just happened the other day is John Gettert, who was the 2012 Olympic coach, and he was the coach of Jordan Weber, who was on the Olympic team, and she was a great gymnast, and she's a great person, and all that kind of stuff. This is not an attack on the athletes, right? He ran the private club that Larry Nassar was the doctor for, which is where a lot of the gymnasts who were abused either happened at the gym or they were gymnasts from that gym who would go to his office at the college, because he also worked at Michigan State, right? So this is a combined situation between private club gymnastics and college gymnastics and USA Gymnastics, right? So John Gettert has been charged both with sexual abuse now and also with human trafficking, right? And the human trafficking is shocking to a lot of people, not to me, right? Like that, like literally, like all of these gymnasts have been trafficked into a system, right? This is MK Ultra kind of stuff. This is social engineering. This is public perception. This is buying of influence. All the same stuff that we talk about as having gone on with the Pizzagate pay has been going on in the gymnastics, like on a smaller realm, and the things are connected. These athletes are going to be the face of equity and Black Lives Matter and gay rights. And I'm waiting for the transgender, that stuff is coming too. And the people that they're working for, the people that they're being trafficked by, are the same people that are into pedophilia. And eventually they're going to end up literally supporting the move. They have no idea at this point that the movement that they're supporting one day is going to go for the idea of pedophilia as a type of sexual preference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And when you brought that up the other day, you hadn't fully fleshed that out to me, but it makes a lot of sense. And that gets back to a lot of different factors. We have mass programming going on, and again, where is the transformation? Where is the spark of the transcendence? None of it's there. It's all about kind of finding, the perp, and even the perp may not even be the real perp. It just might be, a low level perp or the perp in the room. But supposedly, we get that. They get that. They get that one guy or that one person, that one thing. That's supposed to be the thing that's going to liberate them. But it's not. It's not what's going to liberate them. What's going to liberate them is something much bigger and much deeper. And then they wind up finding themselves basically being herded, like what you're talking about, and just moved along into a different pen.
Yeah.
And this happens a lot with people. And it's not just that group. People I hate to say it, even QAnon at times, QAnon people, it's the same thing. They think that they have found this thing, and they found that there are these breakthroughs and these drops and these codes, and
they were energetically trafficked too.
Yeah, and then they're moved into just basically a different pen. And now one could make a case that maybe one pen might be a little bit better than the other pen, because at least one pen is trying to become self-aware, whereas the other pen is being perhaps led that they're self-aware, and maybe just different parameters. And maybe I'm making a value judgment, but it just feels like to me that there's a little bit of a difference. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is. There is a little bit of a difference.
Because QAnon people could hear what you're talking about with gymnastics and pedophilia and trafficking, and they could see that. They could make that connection.
Yeah.
Whereas people inside of the gymnastics world or inside of that circle would not be able to.
No, and I mean, what's so crazy about it is at the very beginning of all this, right at the same time you and I did this first show about this, right? I reached out to the people who do the gymnastic people, they do gymnastics podcasts. And I was like, look, I recognize that some of the things that I talk about are controversial, and I'm not asking you to believe them or agree with them, but I would like to have you on my show, and I would like to discuss, because I've done years and years of research into mind control and satanic ritual abuse and all this kind of stuff. I would like to have a conversation with you. I think you guys are doing a great job covering it, but I want to show you the bigger picture about what's going on here. Of course, I got no response. And these people on the gymnastics podcast, they're the gymnastics nerds. I would have loved talking to them when I was younger, right? But they're gone. I'm listening to her explain how she's going to cover the Winter Cup next week, and don't worry, I've been waiting we have vaccines, and I've gotten 72 tests, and I'm not going to leave my hotel room, and I'm going to wear 12 masks. And it's become this thing where, and you see there's a few gymnasts from a few colleges that are doing their fucking performances with their masks on.
Yeah.
And people are applauding that, right? So they're developing the same system that they say led to the situation where people were under Caroli mind control and had no self-esteem and allowed themselves to be sexually abused. They are obeying. They are trying to become the best little obeyers so that they'll be picked by first in the old situation. It was they wanted to be picked by Marta Caroli for the Olympic team. And now they want to be picked as the social justice model or the virtue signaling model, right? So it's a competition for who can be the most obedient and can do the highest level of gymnastics while under the most oppressive level of obedience. Right? That is going to walk them right into the same situation. So they're all for people speaking out against to the coaches and not being forced to work too hard or be on too strict of a diet anymore. But now they're all who can be the most obedient socially, so that we go viral on YouTube and have Michelle Obama tweet about us and virtue signal, right? The whole thing is just oh my God, they're gone. I have this about once a month now. It's am I going to have to stop paying attention to gymnastics, even though I love gymnastics and theoretically athletics is a separate thing from social world or culture or whatever, right? But this is insane.
Yeah.
This is insane. And I'm pissed that, again, I'm having to make decisions about walking away from some, I know you've been through it too with sports and whatnot. This is something that I've been involved in it at a really deep level for my whole life. And I respect the athletics, but the other thing that's happening simultaneous to this is I'm watching, in a lot of ways, there's a few exceptions, but a decrease in the quality of some of the gymnastics.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Right.
More performance and more attention from the media. So it's also this celebration of glitter, mediocrity covered in glitter. And I'm not, first of all, let me just be very clear. All gymnasts who work hard at it and do well, they're amazing. And this is not me being this is not me being an asshole, although some people think I am. But I'm watching a situation where the level of gymnastics is not commensurate to the level of gymnastics I was watching 10 or 15 years ago in the NC2A, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's getting much more attention and it's more glitzy. It's very Hollywood. It's entertaining.
Well, yeah, it's kind of more like, it's more like gay disco, really. I mean,
Yes.
that's where it's going.
Yeah.
It's strictly ballroom now. I mean, and the reason why that is because striving for standards of excellence and hitting 10.0 and all that stuff that takes a lot of work and a lot of discipline and a lot of sacrifice, that's not part of the new order. That is not part of the new order. You know, excellence, perfection, you know, those are all part of the meritocracy, and you want to aspire to rise to the higher levels of the meritocracy. In the new order, those things don't matter. So you can kind of put on a show, and it's going to be whoever's putting on a better show than actually doing these extremely difficult. And there were people, whether it was with ice skating or gymnastics, that they were always trying to break through and get to the next level. Like I remember when Elvis Stoico did the flip on the skates, and it was like everybody was trying to do that, but he was the guy that did that. He was the guy that stuck that. And the new system doesn't really reward that. It doesn't reward that kind of breakthrough to the next level.
And this goes to, you can move this into, and this is a conversation being had, and it should be, but like, you know, if you move over into elite level gymnastics, like Olympic level, there's this really strange thing going on with Simone Biles now, who, despite having been, I've never really been critical as a person because she seems to be a nice person, but like some of the things going on around her story are a little insane to me. But she is now in this situation where basically she is so far better than everybody else that it's sewn against herself and then everyone else competing for second and third place or whatever, right? But she, for her, because she's so much better than everyone else, because mediocrity has been glorified, right? She is continually upgrading and coming up with new skills, right? And now what's happening is she's going to world and Olympic competitions, performing these skills, and then they're devaluing them because they don't want other people to try them. They want to put a cap on the progress of gymnastics.
That's right. And that's a metaphor for everything right now.
Yes. And so you have this, like, she literally is doing things because she can. And at this point, I'm in total respect for her from that. It's like she could like literally just do half of what she's capable of and still easily win the Olympics. But she is striving for greatness and she enjoys gymnastics. I appreciate that. I respect that. She's doing crazy shit that a lot of men can't even do, right? And they're saying, we are not going to reward you for this because this is not the direction we want gymnastics to go in. And then, of course, you have the gross people out there, I'm not going to name them, who are trying to say that, oh, well, this is also a racial thing. They're not giving her the points. They're not giving it the value it deserves because she's black. And I'm like, there's where the distraction is, right? It's the same distraction I'm talking about with the gymnasts and the Black Lives Matter stuff, right? Like the actual crime is being ignored, and instead we're talking about the color of skin it wears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've been watching sporting events from the past on YouTube, and I've been going through these different cycles. Like for a time being, I was watching high school basketball championship games from like the 1980s and the early 1990s, and some even going back to like the late 1970s. So from places like Indiana, Michigan, New York, and Illinois, right? So I was watching a lot of those games. And it's really interesting looking at the physiognomy of the young men.
Mm-hmm.
They're different.
Yeah.
They are. It's like a different species. Even the players who were not starting, they were big, they were thick. They had defined jawbones. I mean, and it wasn't really race dominant. I mean, you have really healthy, thick dudes that were white and healthy, thick dudes that were black. It wasn't like one race was dominant. And you can just see that it was really, really different. When I watch players now at the college level, it's like they're thin. It's weird. It's like we've morphed into this different species And I think some of it has to do with diet. I think some of it has to do with, some of the other things that we wind up having to put in the bodies of their kids at certain ages. But I also think it's a mindset as well. There's a total mindset. And I've been watching just recently old All-Star games from Major League Baseball from the 70s and the 80s. And even the men, like the men were different. They looked like they were just from a different period of time. Like there's this guy, Phil Garner, he used to play with the Pittsburgh Pirates. I mean, the guy looks like he came right out of 1865.
Yeah.
He's got this mustache, and it's amazing. I mean, we're really living on a different planet now.
Yeah.
A different planet, different species, different kind of rules of engagement for 3D. And I think it's reasonable to understand why people feel displaced.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I observe this too, and I'm going to avoid commenting on that physiques of gymnasts just because there's been so much attention already paid to that. But I watch a lot of tennis, obviously, right? And one of the things that I'm mystified by, like, this isn't a judgment about these people necessarily. Most of the men in the game are incredibly fit. Now, I find the tennis body to be, no one's ever been able to explain this to me. So if someone is out there can explain it to me, most of the men, with the exception of Rafael Nadal and a few others, there's Lajovic, a few others, most of the men do not have well-defined upper bodies. They do not have arm muscles, but they're fit everywhere. They're fit. They're in good shape. Most of the women in the game are not fit. And this is not a critique about, they need to be super thin, right? But like you would expect professional athletes would have muscular definition, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, I don't know, back in the day, you could tell that Martina Navratilova and Chris Evert were athletes, right? Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, some of the female tennis players you can tell, but I can't tell you how many professional women's tennis players there are out there that, they don't look like they're athletes. Like, if I saw them at the mall, I'd think they were there, with their kids and, they were going to go to, they don't look like athletes. And I think this is part, and I know it's not because they don't train numbers of hours a day. I know they do because they're very good, but they don't look fit, right? They don't look like they used to look. This is not a criticism. I'm mystified by it, and I'm trying to understand. And of course, it'll be like people say, it's just that, we've become more accepting of different body types. And that's wonderful. That's not what I'm talking about. A person can be much bigger or much smaller than somebody else and still either be fit or not fit. I know plenty of people who are skinny and not fit. I'm talking about fitness, not, how perfect their body is. Right. And so it's weird. It's bizarre to me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a lot of, frame of reference for modern female tennis players, just the Williams sisters and the robot chick. But yeah, I mean, I remember they used to be really, really fit. I mean,
really fit.
All of them were really fit. And Jennifer Capriati, she was fit. She was thick. Jennifer Capriati was thick. She had a pretty well-defined upper torso, if I remember.
Yeah. Jennifer Capriati is one of these people who she was my favorite female tennis player. I don't really watch a lot. I mean, I watch the women's tennis, but I don't care about it that much. But I loved her. But she had periods of her career where she was not fit, and then periods where she was. And when she was fit, she won, and when she wasn't, she didn't. And it was that simple. And she recognized that at a certain point, right?
Right.
But yes, to your point, the thing that a lot of people don't get about a lot of female tennis players is they're actually quite big. They're quite tall, right? So this is just this isn't even a statement about whether it's good or bad. It's that we are in a different world. Like, the rules of engagement for the reality we are in now defy anything that we've ever known before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. And they're changing faster and faster and faster day by day by day. Like yesterday, in the span of one day, Mr. Potato Head was a man, and then he wasn't.
Right.
And then he was a man again.
Oh, they made him a man again by dinner time?
Yeah. By dinner time, he reclaimed his manly status. But
Aunt Jemima hasn't reclaimed hers.
No.
Okay. So This is the thing. This is the part that I don't understand. Is like, does does changing Mr. Potato Head's name actually help anything? I didn't even know Mr. Potato Head was still a thing, right? So like, how does this help? Right? There probably are things that need to change and that would actually help, but why do they just? We're so satisfied with window dressing.
It's just one. It's one plank on the new holodeck.
Yeah.
And there are many planks. So in one day, you had Mr. Potato Head going through 3 identity changes. You had Oreo coming out and saying that they recognize trans people. Oreo recognizes trans people.
Does that make things better?
And then there was somebody who is like a trans activist who came out and said, "Oh, well, they're a terrible company. They don't really honor real trans values, and they've got all these labor problems, and all, and all this shit, right?" And then somebody else comes out and says, "Oh, they've got a great." Apparently, there's like some group that rates companies based on their LGBTQ friendly business practices. I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently it's a thing. And so that group actually rated that company to be quite good in terms of, their internal hiring practices and their messaging and, all the other stuff. But then somebody else comes out and says, well, they have all these bad labor practices and they can't speak for the trans. So it doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't really matter how much you virtue signal, but that was part of it yesterday.
But that all ignores the main issue. The main issue is that Oreos are fucking disgusting and they're not good for you anyway.
Well, it's true. And so I guess there's a cookie called a hydroxy or something like that,
right? Or
hydrox,
right?
Then they came out and said, "Well, we recognize trans people too."
For fuck's sake! So remember, it's now like Coke and Pepsi, but having nothing to do with the taste of Coke and Pepsi. It's all just who can put the better social justice outfit on. Right.
Exactly. And Coke, it's going to be interesting because Coke is going to lose customers. And I saw this on Twitter, and it's just so bizarre. Well, I'm not going to drink Coke anymore. In fact, I started picking up Pepsi at the store 2 weeks ago before all this happened. Like, why fucking drink any of them? It's going to contribute to your diabetes.
Right.
It's going to help you be obese, and who else knows what's in there? Right? Why even drink that shit to begin with? Why not just drop it?
Yeah.
And I get it. I know a lot of people like it, and there's kind of an addiction level.
But you know what's been happening all week while people have been arguing about potato heads and Oreos and Coke and Pepsi? Biden bombed Syria. And then we had the Federal Reserve shut down yesterday. Yeah.
Actually, it was 2 days ago. It was 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And I think they were moving money. I think they were moving large chunks of money.
Totally.
It was kind of like during the election. Oh, we're just going to shut down the election for a while.
So listen to this. So we all you and I have talked about Tiger Woods before, right? He's an interesting character. I'd put him there with like Roger Federer and those types that like there's something different and mystifying about these people. And if you want a deeper understanding of that, go check out the Rolex website. But at the moment that the news of his car accident was coming across the wires and being reported, every single cryptocurrency went down except for 3. USD coin, DAI, which is the Chinese equivalent of USD coin, and this coin called Tether, which is related to the government issued stable coins.
So it's all 1-to-1. Those are all 1-to-1 transactions.
Right. Everything that went, every single crypto went down, but those 3, they went up. How can a US dollar be worth more than $1? Right. But that's what was happening. Right. And then literally 24 hours later, so over the course of those 24 hours, the Federal Reserve payment system crashed. Janet Yellen talked about let's go with the digital dollar. And within 24 hours, all the cryptos that were down were up, and the 3 that were up were down. So, and you have United States and China and Tether. Right. So yes, these are, and this goes to some of what we were talking about earlier, with me really trying to dig in and understand how reality works and what the archetypes are tied to, like what the people who capture our attention are actually tied to and powered by. Are they powering these currencies, or are they being powered by them? And does the rise and fall of, this goes back to Terence McKenna and his time wave and novelty theory and stuff like that, where he would talk about how the rise and fall of hemlines correlates to the rise and fall of civilizations.
Right.
And we would think of Tiger Woods being like equivalent to the hemline and the financial system as civilization, right? But why are these things moving in unison? Right. They seem to be powered by something similar and tethered to each other in this unusual way. So yes, there are major moves happening in the world, and we're in sacrifice season. Right. And this is a different, I was talking to Michael this morning, and he's like, this is like the Kobe Bryant thing, but a little different. Right. Like it happened at the same time last year, pretty much. Right. And obviously Kobe died, but Tiger, and I've been thinking about this all week too. He just had his legs pulled out from under him. Well, that's what's happening with the system, with the financial system. Right, the rug is being pulled out, or the legs are being pulled out from under. Right, it's not exactly the same as being taken out. Right, but it's being crippled.
Right. Yeah.
Never want to play the game the same way again.
Yeah. What's interesting, and the thing that ties that together with Kobe Bryant, is that Tiger Woods and LeBron James are born. They have the same birthday.
Oh, that's interesting.
They're not born in the same year, but they have the same birthday. And of course, there's a link between the two, right? Same birthday. And then LeBron James takes over as, the king. The crown is handed to LeBron once Kobe, theoretically passes away. And I think Kobe is gone, by the way. I don't think he's around.
So this is like similar to something I'm looking at in tennis. We have this really weird thing coming up right now in tennis where, and this goes to some of the stuff that I've been talking about in regards to Roger Federer, but there was questions just a few weeks ago, because he didn't play in the Australian Open, and there was questions and even comments from him that seemed to imply that he may be done, and if he was done, he was satisfied with his career. Then, and I'm not saying this is causal, but then Michael and I talked about him in a very particular way and related it to something, and by the time we were done with that episode, it had been announced that Roger Federer was returning to competition on March 8th, almost like something snapped him back to life. So he will return to competition on March 8th, on the same day that Novak Djokovic will eclipse Roger Federer for the most weeks at number one, right? So it's kind of a similar changing of the guard, right? For Kobe, LeBron, Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic. There's really weird and interesting things going on with Novak Djokovic as well. But these things always parallel what is going on with governments and financial systems, right? Ooh, what was that?
Well, somebody's trying to call me.
Oh, is it someone good?
Well, yeah.
Maybe Kobe calling. So my point with this stuff is just all of these things that our attention are being drawn to, right? They are distractions from something else going on, but they're also connected. There is a cohesive thread to this system that is yanking on both ends of this. Yeah. That is puppeteering both.
Yeah. I mean, we could see that with Tom Brady, when Tom Brady went from being a patriot to a pirate. And the election, theoretically, I have to watch my words now. The election, theoretically, theoretically, the erection being stolen, and you could even see that coming a mile away. Yeah. When Tom Brady changed helmets, that the country was going to change. Yeah. It wasn't going to be wrapped in the old red, white, and blue anymore. It was going to be a Buccaneer style kind of consciousness, raiders and traders.
Can I give my Tom Brady thread? This is a good one.
Sure.
All right. So on the same day, we had Castor being the Trump attorney doing a terrible job, and articles being written about him. So I'm reading through Zero Hedge, and I see that there's this article. I just read the article. Then on the next page, there's an article about the whole scenario going on in Tampa with people not wearing their masks at the after thing celebration, right? And I'm like, whatever. But first, my attention was drawn to the person in that story's last name was Castor too. So Castor is Trump's attorney, right? And Castor is the mayor of Tampa, who is saying she's going to impose fines on people not wearing masks, even though DeSantis said you can't do that. So there's those two stories, both on the front page of Drudge. I'm like, that's weird. I've never heard the last name Castor before, and now I'm hearing it twice on the front page the same day. Yeah. So I go and I look up what castor is, spelled Castor. Of course, I'm familiar with castor oil, but I'm checking to see what castor is. So castor is like a resin from a tree that beavers consume, and then they secrete it from their glands based on that, whatever it is, what they make castor oil from. But at the time I'm reading about these beavers, I happened to be watching the gymnastics meet with the Oregon State Beavers, right? So there's this synchronicity that's happening. And while I'm looking up what castor is, I noticed that, when you type in on Google a word, it'll show you other words that it's connected to, so you can search things for that, right? Mm-hmm. So underneath castor and castor oil, there was something that said Castor Maritime. So I noted it. When I was done researching castor, I went back and checked what Castor Maritime was, right? Castor Maritime was a stock that had been surging in the same 24 hours, right? So why was castor stock surging at the same time? We have two castors in political news, right? And one of the castors is in political news based on the victory of the Buccaneers. Well, Buccaneers are pirates. What kind of law do pirates practice? Law of the sea, maritime law. That is why we're not experiencing any justice with the erection fraud, right? So what the fuck is, this is what when I'm trying to figure out how the system works. Like, how are this can't be accidental, right? They want me to believe that these things are all coincidental.
Well, I think when you get into those kinds of analogies, especially like the two casters, like everything that I've been doing this for a while now, it all seems to come back to the sign of Gemini, right? Because here we have Castor and Pollux.
Isn't that cat food?
No, well, it is a cat food, but Castor and Pollux were twins.
Okay.
So they're twin gods, patrons of sailors. Here we go. Associated with horsemanship.
There we go. See what I'm talking about, though? The sailors.
In Latin, the twins are known as the Gemini, literally twins, or castores, as well as the Tenerade or the Tindarids. Pollux asked Zeus to let him share his own immortality with his twin to keep them together, and they were transformed to the constellation Gemini. So we had two castors.
Yeah.
Right. And it's amazing how much I just keep coming back to Gemini when it relates to this reality. I mean, and I've quoted this chapter and verse from Kennedy to Trump and the role that Gemini plays throughout all of it. With the Twin Towers and Saturn in Gemini and the Moon in Gemini and all the players that we came to know through the 9/11 drama. The main players. Larry Silverstein, Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump, they're all Gemini. So Gemini is the realm of like the trickster. And right now we're in heavy Gemini with the true node in Gemini. So we're going to get a lot of this stuff. It's going to come up and a lot of synchronicities and a lot of parallel realities and a lot of reflection and even a lot of inversion because, David Palmer and I talked about this, and I've talked about it before with the South Node in Sagittarius. We're going to be in decline when it comes to things that are defined. Like Sagittarius defines things. When we think about Sagittarius, we think about like the 10 Commandments and, it's orthodox. It's like, do unto others, and there are consequences. Like so, you go outside the lines, there are consequences. That's not the case with Gemini. Gemini is the devil in the details. And so I just keep coming up with this. It keeps coming back again and again and again. And I think, and it even leads to like this Janus thing, which I stumbled onto, and that we're in this Janus kind of ritual right now. And what's happening is that we're going to come out and there's going to be a new order, right? There will be a new order. But in order for there to be a new order, we have to be in this place where there's this kind of this echo thing going on, this reflection going on, and we're not really sure who is who or what is what, and we're mired in this, how do I say it, this unreconcilable duality in some ways.
Yeah.
Because at some point that duality will be reconciled and will be in a new place, but it will be very, very different. And during this time, because there's going to be a lot of chaos here, people are going to be buccaneers. They're going to be pirates. There's not going to be the rule of law. That said, again, when we get into Gemini, the same rules won't apply to the same groups, right? I mean, you could go into Trader Joe's, and if you were Black Lives Matter or Antifa or a combination of the two, you could rob Trader Joe's blind and nothing would happen to you. But if you go in there en masse without a mask, they're ready to call the cops, right? So that's another kind of version of what we're going through.
Okay, so do you think this applies, this Gemini, and I'm going to see if I can thread this needle too, right? So this Gemini stuff and this Janus stuff, can this be applied to realities? Have you seen, like, if you haven't seen the movie, have you at least seen the trailer for the movie Tenet?
No.
Okay.
I know about the movie, but I haven't seen the trailer.
Okay. So
it's about time moving backwards and stuff like that.
Right. So there's two realities next to each other, right? One sort of where time is moving one direction and the other time is sort of moving the other direction, right? And they have figured out that they can create these sort of crossover zones, right? These spaces, certain areas you can cross over. But when you go into the other reality, it's mostly the same. Some conditions are slightly different, including they have to wear a mask because otherwise and bullets go the other way. If you go onto the other side, it'll be inverted or stuff like this, right? Yeah. So we have we're in this space where there's two realities very close to each other. And then there's this like a red and a blue reality, right? And then there's this purple zone, right? That is kind of maybe like this sort of Janus you're talking about. We're in this ritual of this crossing over ritual. And I think these realities are mostly similar, but with slight differences, kind of like twins, right? Twins are mostly similar, but with slight differences. And sometimes those differences are actually quite significant, but you can't tell, on first glance, they're not necessarily obvious, right? Mm-hmm. And so, what you're talking about things are going to be resolved. The resolution is either going to be that these two realities are compressed into one subsumes the other, or they're completely compressed into this purple zone in the middle, or one subsumes the other and becomes the red or the blue, or they're pressed together, or they're going to completely split apart and we are going to be literally living in completely different realities. Like, right. Do you think that this Gemini thing applies to that level? Since I'm so interested in dimensions and time travel and reality creation right now. Like, what about this Gemini and this Gemini duality and this Janus ritual? Can it be applied to that as well?
Well, I mean, theoretically, yes and no. I mean, the Janus ritual, also one of the things about the Janus ritual, back in the days when it was actually really, really practiced, when they actually did this thing, it was a time of war. That was the other part that was connected to this. Like, there was a war going on. And usually it was when the war was over that you would come out the other side and you would either, take the mask off, or you would have a different face as a result of this thing. And I think it's pretty, I think you and I would agree, and many people watching this would agree, that we are at war. There is a war taking place. And that's kind of the weird thing, is because we don't, bombs aren't dropping in our cities per se, although maybe over the summertime they did. But there are all the elements of a war going on. There is propaganda. Mm-hmm. There's damage to critical infrastructure. I mean, so all the things that we would normally associate with wartime conditions, they're happening, right? So that is part of what we're going through. Now, as far as where it can go, I mean, I would like to think that, if we have to, or if it's possible, we can fork off. And there's one group that goes this way and one group that goes the other way, because it doesn't really feel like we're going to be able to cohabitate together, unless, of course, there's a major catastrophe, which is always possible. But the new order is defining theoretically how people are going to assemble once this thing is over. Now, the X factor here is the jab, and how that's going to impact people 6 to 8 months down the line, and what their condition is going to be. And what the fallout is going to be over that, because we don't know at this point. And millions of people have gotten the jab. Mm-hmm. Millions of people, and we've seen some very dramatic effects early on. Somebody sent me, was it you? I mean, it may not have been you. Somebody sent me something. It was, God, let me see if I can find it. It was a really trippy, who sent this to me? It was a really trippy, like firsthand account of the vaccine. And no, I know. Here, let me see.
The one where like they couldn't feel God anymore.
No. Hold this one is. I know I can find it. Hold on. I'll read it. I won't mention any names here.
Okay.
So I can find it.
Okay, look for it for a second. I have to pee, otherwise I'm not going to.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Okay, I gotta wait for Emily. There we go. I found it. How's everybody doing? We made it happen today, huh? It was a little crazy at the beginning, but we made it. Thanks for showing up, and thanks for being here and following the cookie trail. I'll be back on Vimeo on Monday. I kind of like Vimeo better, and I guess now that I have my YouTube privileges back, I can stream for the first. In fact, I can stream. This is how magical Vimeo is. I can stream for the first half hour on YouTube and Facebook. So you get to see half an hour, and then after that, I'm going to cut the stream, and you'll have to come over to Vimeo for the rest. So it'll be good, though, because I know a lot of people were wondering where I went, and though a lot of you were informed, thanks to Emily making a little video, it'll be clearer on Monday. Okay, let me read this to you. This is an email that was sent to me, and it was from a friend of the person who sent me the email.
Okay.
Had the COVID vaccine earlier, and I waited 30 minutes after because I'm allergic to sulfosulfites and penicillin, so just to be cautious. And another 15 minutes later, after I drove away, I went to drink some water and felt like I couldn't swallow. I tried to calm myself down and took deep breaths and felt okay. Then my right side of my face into my forehead went numb. And that region still, and that's in capitals, feels numb. 5 hours later, think Novocaine wearing off after a dental procedure. In the past 45 minutes, I broke out in a rash all over my trunk and chest. Called the advice nurse. They put me through to a doctor right away who said that I had an allergic reaction to the blank. And they have found that although rare, it seems to be happening to people who have sulfa allergies and shellfish allergies, which sometimes I have an allergic reaction to. Benadryl took the rash away, but the partial numbness on one side of my face hasn't gone away. Mm-hmm. They want to check me out tomorrow for Bell's palsy, although tonight there is no drooping of my face as far as I can tell. I still think that getting the vaccine is the right thing to do. I think I just had a rare allergic reaction. The doctor tonight said that after my visit tomorrow, they will determine if I should or shouldn't get the second vaccine. And here's the kicker. I would like to add that everyone at the Oakland Coliseum, from the police to the National Guard to the nurses and in between, were nothing but wonderful and professional. And that line of cars and shots, etc., ran like a well-oiled machine. My nurse, Rachel, was amazing. Didn't even feel the shot going into my arm. And it's kind of like it's kind of like complimenting the service of the waiters in hell that are feeding you hot, steaming plates of shit. Right?
Yeah. It reminds me of these gymnastics people that I'm talking about who are like, like it's different but the same, right? So, what this was making me think about. So, someone you and I both know, right, told me about a client that they had this week that got it, right? And this client is from the former Soviet Union, right? Came here to, came to America for freedom. So when this person was asked why they took it, she said, well, because it was recommended, right? And so these same people somehow that escaped the Soviet Union, right, are literally doing what's recommended. Like, I don't know about you, but if I had lived through whatever was going on in the Soviet Union, I'd probably be suspicious of anything that was recommended, right? But this is how good and thick the brainwashing has been. And because this tyranny looks very, very different than the kind that they lived through, because this has been like a very like augmented reality, techno-fascist kind of takeover that is like, looks a lot different than, you know, than it did there. Like, they're just going along with it, right? Like, it's crazy. But yes, your point about complimenting the waiter who just served you a shit sandwich for their fine service.
Right. Yeah. Right? Yeah, exactly.
It's scary and sad. And I hope this person, you know, is okay, but I don't understand. I just don't. I mean, I know a lot of people who it's crazy to me how many people I know that are doing it, right? And they all seem to be, all the ones I know personally seem to be okay. I hear stories of people from extended situations that don't feel well or having bad reactions, blah, blah, blah. Lots of stories of people passing away, you know what I mean, within days or weeks or whatever. Like, you know, I know someone who has clients who know somebody who, you know, died right after it and whatnot. But, you know, I do think that it's going to be part of the separation, right? Like, I had David Weiss on my show a few weeks ago, and we were talking both about this period of time, but also the decision one makes around said procedure we're talking about as being a certain kind of intelligence test or a certain kind of like sense test, right? And that the people that have that in their body are going to be magnetized to one reality, and the ones who don't will not be, right? Yeah. That was a summary, kind of a big, you know, a general summary of it, but that's where we kind of went in the conversation, right? Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a level of operating system in certain people's bodies that are going to be responding to commands of a certain type that other people's bodies may not be.
Yeah. Well, what's going to happen next? Where's the next shoe going to drop?
I don't know. Like, I think it's, you know, well, one thing was pointed out to me by a source that normally I don't give much weight to, but this was an interesting thing, that like, we haven't had a State of the Union address yet, and it's almost March, and generally the State of the Union always happens in January or February, but we're not even hearing any talk of a State of the Union.
Right.
So we've heard talk of a parliamentary system, and we've had no State of the Union. And, you know, with every single passing day, reality seems increasingly less real, right?
Right.
So I don't know. Like, I don't know if the big reveal is about to happen, and the big reveal is that we've been like living on a large movie set our whole lives, right?
Yeah.
And we have the choice of remaining on the movie set where we will be fed shit sandwiches, but with a nice server for the rest of our lives, or venturing off the movie set to an unknown landing, a la the blind skills we talked about earlier. So I don't know if that's what's coming. I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
Oh, I think it's going to be financial. I think we're, you know, if we are being moved into this so-called green economy, you don't need a petrodollar for the green economy. And that's so. I mean, that's one of the reasons why they want to have a green economy. They don't want the petrodollar anymore. And I think it's going to be financial, and I think there are going to be some huge peaks and valleys, huge, like canyon size,
yeah,
canyon size dips and canyon size, and you know, mountainous peaks, and then something's going to happen. And I'm thinking. I think March. I think May is going to be an interesting month. I think May is going to be an interesting month because that's when the sun is in Taurus. We're going to have the sun squaring Saturn, sun squaring Jupiter. We're going to have Sun Uranus conjunction during that time, and you know, Taurus, we're dealing with money and resources and assets. So I think May, and I feel like the beginning of July, when Mars moves into Leo and really gets into that intensity with the squares to Uranus and the squares to Saturn. I think those are going to be the two big months And in July, I think you're going to see some of the effects, some of the kind of more midterm effects of the jab, like the second jab. And now they're talking about the third jab.
Right. And the 5th and the 27th and
right.
115 and yeah.
Right. So and how long can the economy really go on fumes? How much did Elon Musk lose the other day? $30 billion. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel like at some point we're headed for a pileup. We're headed for a pileup on the interstate. I got an email from a young guy who actually listens to the show, and he told me that he works for a major paint supplier.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a regional meeting with all the managers. And they said that this summer they're going to be really short on product.
Of paint?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's significant because painting is connecting to building and construction. And not every building is Navajo white, right? I mean, there's lots of different colors.
Right. Swiss mocha or Navajo white or
So I think that's just one indicator that we're going to be dealing with shortages. I think shortages are coming. I think we're going to be dealing with food shortages. I think we're going to be dealing with product shortages. I mean, the third worldification of the United States is going to increase, and the escape outlets are getting few and far between because everywhere we go now, we're bombarded by politics. We're bombarded by politically correct, slogans. There's just going to be no place for people to really go. And I think the summer is going to be very difficult, very difficult. And I think the financial game is going to take a big hit this year. So, and it's going to be, go ahead.
Have you ever heard of, I think his name is William Delbert, either Gann or Gannon?
No.
All right. So somebody in the Project Kids group brought this guy to my attention. And he was kind of like an economy, like stock trader guy, but also an astrologer. And he used the astrology to come up with these models and templates for the stock market.
Right.
And he also had a lot of interesting ideas about reality and the levels of it and how it worked. He's from like 80 or 100 years ago. Like it's not a modern guy. I don't understand enough about either astrology or the stock market to make sense of what he's doing there, but it's code for something much more. So when you were talking about these peaks and valleys, right, and how they related to the astrology, I was just curious if you'd heard of this guy. So I think that, I would like to look more into it. This guy, it's very interesting. And if you look at his book covers, they all look like pictures of events from modern days. Like it's almost like you've been able to predict 9/11 and things like this through the system as well. Looks kind of an interesting guy. But to your point about these things that may be happening, sure, I think that that's highly likely. But I also think there's these things are going to be most frustrating to people who continue to try and play the game the same way they've always played, right? And if you use this opportunity to shift sort of the way you approach the game board and how you deploy your game, because whether you think reality is really real or you think we're in an augmented reality game or some combination of it, there is a game afoot that's being played, right? And sometimes changing the way you play the game rather than playing it the same way you always have, but trying to play it harder or more seriously or more intently is kind of just what is necessary to suddenly see a reserve of goods pop up in a place that you would never have thought to look. Right. So that's what I recommend, as we go into this is like, okay, everybody's going to be like rushing to Costco for the last 3 rolls of toilet paper. Right. Like what is going on the other end of the field that is not being recognized because everybody's paying attention to the chaos at Costco. Right.
Yeah. I agree. We have a little comment here in chat, which is kind of interesting.
Okay.
I miss Nick Plur says, have you all seen Manhattan, London, Heathrow Airport, and others? are being dismantled, closed permanently, closed to the public anyway. Cruise line ships are being destroyed and sold for parts. Casual travel is over for the masses. What do you think of that?
So I haven't heard that. Doesn't surprise me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't. I do think that something weird is going on, because even though like we hear, I'm seeing a lot of stories about how vaccine passports are going to become the new reality, and if you want to go on a summer vacation, you have to get your vaccine passport. And I'm like, okay, I don't know how that's really going to work, because theoretically you would think that all of these travel, like airlines, cruise lines, hotels, blah, 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 they want to make money. And by reducing the number of possibilities of people who can travel, right, you're reducing your ability to make money. So I'm not clear about that kind of thing. I haven't heard about the airports. I did see weird stories a few months back about the cruise lines, how like they're allowed to run now, but not with people on them. So I'm like, well, what would be the point of running a cruise line not with people unless they're being used for something else?
Right.
Something else is going on, which I'm always suspicious of. But I also, like, on the flip side of this, like, okay, like I take this as like a challenge to us to learn other ways of travel. Right? Like to me, that's like a more fun thing than like sitting around going, not that I'm well aware of all the tyrannical perceptions of this and whatnot. And I digest those as well. And then I also go like, what if humans have been operating at well below their true capacity for a really long time? And whoever created this reality is like, fuck, they haven't figured it out yet. I'm going to have to start like shutting down the distractions so that people will fucking discover their brilliance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. David Spangler talked about this with the telephone a long time ago. And what would happen if the telephone was never invented? Like how would people communicate? We would have developed along a different line in a different way. And I think he's right. And I think you're right.
Like literally yesterday when I was driving home, I'm on the freeway, and the thought passed through my head, Laura is going to call me right now. And 2 seconds later, the phone rang and it was Laura. And we were both doing different things than we normally do on a Thursday. So it wasn't like we were in a routine of something, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I was like, she's going to call me right now. So the telephone has become training wheels.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's called the soul phone, right?
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. You know, long time ago, I had this kind of reverie. This is back in the 90s. And I actually was able to kind of see where we are now and the ramifications of a tighter and tighter control system. And that ultimately people would have to opt out. They would just have to opt out. Mm-hmm. And it was through the opting out, ultimately, that they would discover who they were and that they would discover, you know, a very different kind of personal technology. Yep. And that was really clear to me. And I was thinking, I was ruminating that around 1994 because I could see where everything was going and that there would just ultimately be so many restrictions and so many controls that in order to, you know, be able to be outside of it, you would just have to say unplug. Yeah.
All of the technology is modeled mostly after us, but if not after us, modeled after something in nature. So there is nothing that the technology can do that we theoretically can't do. They've just convinced us otherwise. Right.
I agree with that. It's a big con game.
Yeah. I mean, birds didn't model themselves after airplanes.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That's true. That's true.
You know, and so I think that, you know, that's one of these things that we just have to know and trust in deep in our hearts, and the way we were talking about earlier in the show about sort of a level of salvation, right? Anything that we need to do, we can do. Yeah,
I would agree. I would agree. And, you know, one of the shows that I did this last week, I was looking at this period in 1977 when there was the Saturn-Uranus square. And by going back during that time, I was able to really note that was a time of evolution. Like technology was really taking off. There was possibility. There was magic. And what's happened now is we're in another Saturn-Uranus square, but it's more about de-evolution now. It's not about novelty. It's not about technology, although they'd like to get you to think that it is. whether it's augmented reality or whether it's virtual reality. I think the win is ultimately, and I hate to say this because I use a lot of technology, is going to be unplugging. I mean, this is where the win is going to be, and it goes back to what you were saying about making that move on the balance beam and not knowing where you're going to land.
Yep.
Well, if I unplug, what's going to happen? Am I going to be left out? Am I not going to know what's going on in the world? And I think there's some really interesting thresholds that we could, experience with something like that.
Absolutely. Last Sunday, I had my first day in a really long time where I didn't go on the computer at all. I didn't open my computer all day on Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's the first time that I've done it's like that's happened when I've been traveling, but that's not happened when I've been home for a really long time. Right. Mm-hmm. And like at a certain point at night, it was like, oh, I realized I haven't been on the computer. Should I check? No, I'm not going to check. I'm just not going to go check my anything and whatever. And I felt really much more rested when the week came, and everything took care of itself, right? Like I didn't lose out on anything by not looking at my email or not looking at my Patreon or my YouTube or whatever. Everything that needed to happen still happened. And so like now, all right, well now like, okay, like maybe I'll do that every week, one day when I'm not with the technology, and maybe I'm going to go on a vacation someplace where there's no technology and whatever. And I think that we just have to, like we said, all the technology is modeled after us. If we need to do something, we can. And if there's something we can't do, maybe it's because it's not actually something we need to do.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good chat today. A lot of good stuff going on over there.
Oh, cool. I can't see the chat where I'm at. So yeah.
Okay. There's a lot of good running commentary.
Awesome. You always have
I've got a week. Yeah, man. Chatlandia is awesome.
It is. It's its own entity.
It is its own entity.
It's like Chatlandia. You don't really have a chat room, Robert. Chatlandia has a show.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of show, where's Jasper? Jasper.
I don't know. I was wondering where Jasper is. I was earlier when we were talking about how you've created your own reality there, right? I was like, yeah, you created your own reality, and you, Jasper, and Rosie just live in it, right? Like seriously, like your house is your own little reality. And you've got your own sort of ecosystem. I mean, Jasper, I can't believe he didn't show up today, but maybe he always shows up. Sometimes Rosie.
Sometimes he's probably on the bed with Rosie. Sometimes being on the bed with Rosie is, I think, more, I don't know, it's more of his happy place at times.
I get it. I can't blame him, dude. I like Rosie a lot, too. She gave me a kiss. Yeah. I know she bit Steve's ankles, but she gave me a kiss. So I like her.
Rosie is complex. She's definitely complex. Well, Emily, this has been great, and I'm glad we were able to do this on the show today, and it just kind of worked out this way. But you'll be able to put this up on your channel, obviously, and your peeps can get a hold of it.
I think all of my peeps are also your peeps. I think you have some peeps that aren't my peeps, but so I think most people will have seen it, but we will link to it anyway. And I think we're gonna start doing some more Mashcast kinds of stuff. Robert and I are gonna be in closer proximity to one another, so live in studio, mashes.
I'm gonna have to create a MASH lounge.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
And you can come out on a Friday or something, or just any day of the week, and it could even be a nighttime, right?
Yep.
And you and Laura could even spend the night here if you wanted to. We could do a MASHcast.
A MASHcast, and we can
MASHcast in the MASH lounge.
We can do MASHcast IRL, right? That's how you know it's legit, as if it has the IRL after it, right? And we can invite all of our friends over, and people won't know if they live there with us or not, or what's really going on. We can have an amusement park out back, all that. I'm kidding.
Do you think somebody's going to kill somebody out there in Tim's little Lost Boys community? Do you think somebody's going to go postal out there?
I don't. Well, I mean, it is mystifying to me whatever is going on. I mean, I don't think that much about it, but I'm like, this is pretty weird, right? Like if you have people who are supposedly truth tellers right, who are like, walking this very dangerous edge. Like, why would you all pull them together into one spot unless it's easier? There's two, right? And it'd certainly be easier to off them all by something there. But also, like, I don't know, like, maybe they all have the same handler, and this way they've got all of their miscreant children in one place, right? Yeah. And it's easier to sort of, it is an interesting situation that you have going on there, right? And I mean, I don't know, like, there's part of me that feels like it's kind of like he's doing what Joe Rogan did, right? And like, he has this whole place where he does the show and people come and go, and there's like a non-disclosure agreement about you're going to be on the show and where the studio is located and all that kind of stuff. But the difference is he, like, seemingly, like, a lot of them seem to live there, right? So they're all sort of living, either in one house or spread out on a property. And it's like, I think intentional communities are interesting. I don't necessarily have an interest to live in one, but I wonder what the intent behind this community is.
Right. Well, in those situations, everything becomes amplified. They become pressure cookers. Mm-hmm. And you begin to have a lot of, like, reflection with your own stuff with other people. Mm-hmm. And if people haven't lived in a group situation like that for any period of time, if you don't have any real kind of intention and you want to see it as an opportunity to grow, it can get very intense very quickly. And I can see something like that happening out there because they're dealing with a lot of, like, high pressure material. Yeah. They're dealing with, these events, these world shattering events. They're trying to, crack the net on certain things. And Tim is a really big personality. Luke is somewhat of a big personality, not as big as Tim is. And then you've got Ian, who isn't a big personality, but seems like he's getting more and more of Tim's animus. I don't know.
Lydia pushing the buttons in the corner. Was it pushing the buttons or pulling the springs? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what her. And
she's making funny comments every now and then now.
The Ian situation is really interesting because it's like, Tim is really mean to him sometimes.
Oh, he's abusive. I think he's beyond mean. He's abusive.
I think that Ian does say some shit that is stupid, but he also says some stuff that is interesting, right? But the way that Tim just dismisses him or swats him down, right? It's like, what's going on here? And you know what I mean?
He said the other day, "Oh, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard from you." Yeah. And it wasn't like, kind of two guys like, "Hey, that was a dumb fuck thing you just said, dumb fuck," right? It was really dismissive, really dismissive.
Yeah, and it was, it is interesting. He thinks he's very, very smart. Tim does. He thinks he's incredibly intelligent, and that, I'm not saying he's dumb. I'm not saying he's dumb.
I think Tim is intelligent,
but he's not as brilliant as he thinks.
No, I don't think he is either.
Yeah, he obviously is very good. Well, business mind has been very good. He's been able to be very successful for himself, right? But it's weird to watch. I mean, it's bizarre to watch that.
You know what else is weird is their recent love affair with guns. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed that? Mm-hmm. Like, if you're
and booze and
guns, but like Tim has made this hard right with guns. Mm-hmm. And, my experience is with certain people that if you're going to get into guns, you don't say a fucking thing.
Yep.
Right. You don't make it a big deal. You don't broadcast that, you guys just went down to the gun shop in just outside of Branson and just got a 50 cal or whatever. And they've got people on there now that talk a lot about guns. Like, I think at least once every 2 weeks, they've got some kind of a gun advocate on there.
So do you think there's going to be like a gun event there?
Well, I don't know if there is going to be a gun event, but there could be.
Like an active shooter?
There could. I mean, look, you're dealing with an environment that is, I think, kind of a high pressure environment. Tim is always on. Mm-hmm. The show probably never ends, even when it's over. Mm-hmm. You're getting the sense that alcohol is being introduced into that environment. Mm-hmm. You had Alex Jones come rolling in there sloshed, and Everybody thought that Alex was kind of the cool drunk uncle that, rolled into town. And then you have guns that are being introduced. Now, whether or not there will be a gun event there, I don't know, but there's a lot of wild cards, a lot of X factors in play. And you've got people like the ATF and you've got the FBI. I mean, if they wanted to make a splash, if Tim wasn't real, if Tim wasn't Intel, it was Intel, who knows? But if they wanted to make a splash, they could go in there and they could do a raid on his place. I mean, wouldn't that make some really big news across the internet?
Mm-hmm. And because he has now tied himself to sort of the truth community or the right wing or the whatever, the gun people, is he in Branson? Do you know that? Is that where he is?
He's in Missouri. I know he's in Missouri. I don't know if he's in Branson, but
Missouri is it's undercover in a lot of ways, but it is hugely important in our political situation, right? There's a lot of very weird, very creepy, very dark shit that emanates out of that Branson, Poplar Bluff, those kinds of areas, right? Like that is where a lot of the like hidden network, let's say, keeps the base.
Right. So
think Ozark, the show, that kind of stuff.
T. Jordan asked, do they discuss the jab? Tim was pro-vaccine about 8 months ago. I don't think he's anti-vaccine.
Mm-mm. What's interesting, like that's part of when he swats Ian down, but he's like, it's funny. He won't allow conspiracy theories about it. They don't really talk about it too much. And there came up one thing where Ian or someone brought up about the Gates patent with them, using cryptocurrency, mining cryptocurrencies through the energy systems in the body and kind of that kind of thing. And Tim just swatted that practice content hygiene like he does, right? Like I've talked about it, right? Yeah. Swatted it down, right? And Luke didn't say anything. And Luke knows the answer, right? So he basically, Tim tried to present it as, it's not a devious patent. What it really is trying to encourage people through making cryptocurrencies to be at one with nature and exercise more, right? So he swatted Ian's conspiratorial viewpoint, or whoever the guest was. I think that Ian said it, but I can't remember. Swatted it down and then painted a shiny veneer on it. And Luke, who knows better, didn't say anything.
Right. Yeah.
And you've watched a couple of times when stuff like that happens and Luke doesn't say anything.
Luke doesn't say anything.
Luke knows. But this is the thing I find suspicious, right? Is that Luke was demonetized by YouTube. Demonetized by YouTube a few months back. And very shortly after being demonetized by YouTube, finds himself as the right-hand man on probably one of the most popular and profitable podcasts on YouTube. So if they were demonetizing him, but it's okay that he makes money through, he's obviously, I think they're using the super chats on the podcast to pay the people that are there because, the right kind of thing. So how is it unless it was more convenient to sort of bring him in where he could be better monitored, controlled, and practiced content hygiene on? Yeah,
maybe. It sounds like they've traveled a lot. Like they had stories about them going to Korea and stuff. So
they both used to live stream from the event. Like they met at Occupy Wall Street, and that's they would go to a lot of these hot zones together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. What I know about YouTube is that it's wildly inconsistent, and that might be one of its inconsistencies. And Tim seems to have favored nation status with YouTube.
Totally.
So he probably gets away with a lot more than. Well, I've been demonetized in a long time. I was demonetized back around 2012, actually.
How were you demonetized? Like, what?
I cannot apply. Like I've tried to apply to get monetization, meaning that people could run ads on my, and they probably still run ads. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't get any money from that.
Yeah.
And when I tried it, they said, well, you have content that, we cannot monetize and, that our community may find offensive. if you could, take that down, then we would reconsider that. But they didn't say what the content was.
So this is what it's. I think they're moving to a place where they only want content on YouTube that there are companies that are willing to advertise on. So right, so it's basically like they want every video to be monetized, and if it can't be monetized, then they don't want it. And part of how they discourage it is by demonetizing you now.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that happened to me a long time ago.
Yeah.
So I never really looked to YouTube to provide any income stream.
Yeah.
For what I was doing. So, and it really wasn't the totality of how I would derive income anyway.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that big of a deal.
You have to be an incredibly big channel to make any kind of significant money on YouTube, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
The only thing, the only thing I just recently got monetized. Like, I can offset a few costs. Like, the few $100s it costs me to have a Vimeo account might be paid by the amount of money I make off of YouTube this year.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. But they told me that if I don't monetize my channel, then they may still put ads on it. Right. So if they're going to put ads on it, like I didn't monetize for a long time. Right. But if they're going to put ads on it, and they also basically said that the thing in if you look at the terms and agreements, that they'll be eliminating channels that eventually aren't monetized. Right. So it's I don't know. I'm hoping for a better thing than YouTube someday.
Yeah. Well, we're headed in that direction. With the Vimeo transition.
Yeah.
And I still, there's still a few things to work out here with the whole Vimeo side of things, but it's been pretty good Monday through Thursday.
Yeah.
It's been good.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. And I've enjoyed the sense of not having to really police my thoughts.
Yeah.
Which has been great. It's been a lot more liberating than I thought it would be.
It's weird how, I don't catch myself censoring myself too often, but you catch yourself being like, okay, I have to be careful, right? Yep. And it's like, that is not good. I don't like it. Yeah, I don't like it either.
Well, I think some of it is good. I think some of it is good. I think I've managed to figure out how to get really, really close to things.
Yeah, it's an art.
With language without like tripping a wire. And that was really conscious. Like, how am I going to go about this and talk about things in a way that people would not, number one, be turned off and be open. Number two, have the people who are so hardcore still want to listen to me and say, well, this guy's sugarcoating this.
Yeah.
And he's not, he's not really getting down to the brass tacks, right? So that's been a kind of a conscious evolution. And I think that's cool. That's okay. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is when that line gets moved. Yeah. And I can't talk about things like elections, or I can't talk about things like adjuvants, or I can't talk about things like injectable nanotech. Right. That's when it gets a little too tight, a little too close, and because I'm okay with some limitations, that's like kind of beyond the line I'm willing to deal with.
Yeah, no, I agree. There is something to learning the art of encoding, right? But because I think some of these other things that we're talking about, like, even though they wouldn't be things that would necessarily be censored by YouTube, there's information that's not for everybody. And you want the people who you were actually speaking to understand what you're talking about without having to make this blatant announcement that people are going to misperceive, people are going to, whatever, be closed down to or whatnot. So I think that's always been for people who like the deeper, more esoteric, occulted kind of information like we do. I think learning to understand how to encode your material so the people who are supposed to get the message get it and everyone else is just like, is fun. Yeah.
It goes, going back to that time where I had that image of moving away, completely moving out of society and dropping everything. Right around the same time, I had this thought that because of censorship, and I knew censorship was coming, that at some point it would become so small and so tiny. It would be like the eye of a needle. Mm-hmm. Like it would be like the eye of a needle, and the only thing that would fit through the eye of a needle would be a laser beam.
Yep.
A really fine pinpoint laser. And that ultimately that's what we would have to become. That
I think that's exactly right. I think I think Randy has a whole series about that. He has that series called Eye of the Needle that he's doing now, right? And I think that's kind of the idea that he was seeing too. So I think people who could see what was coming. I mean, he may be speaking about it in some different ways than you and I are, based on just what our relevant interests are and whatnot. But I think we're in a cycle where we're going to have to compress information into that very thin strip and thread the needle.
Yeah. So whatever that is, whether it's your laser-like intent or your laser-like focus or your laser-like truth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what it all is going to come down to, I think.
You had this vision in 1994?
Yeah, I was thinking about this shit in 1994.
As always, you're a few weeks ahead of the rest of us.
A little bit. I had a lot of time and some interesting psychotropics on my side.
Gotcha.
That was my Pluto conjuncting my ascendant in Scorpio period. It was my endarkenment.
You're in darkenment.
My endarkenment.
I like that.
Yeah. All right. Let me see if there's anybody else in chat. You guys, anything you want to say here before we get off the air? Do you have any comments, questions, anything for Emily before we kick off the weekend?
A while since I was on FARcast. It's probably been like 2 or 3 years since I was on FARcast. So
yeah, I'm trying to think the last time you were on here. Well, that's not true. You were here for the event in October.
Well, I hosted FARcast.
Yes, you hosted FARcast.
I hosted it. The Mashcast FARcast. That was the first Mashcast, I guess. FARcast and Mash together, yes.
But yeah, I you know, it was really interesting. I remember when I had you on, right when the whole gymnastics thing was going on. I don't know how you feel about it, but I felt like that was a turning point for you.
I think it's still to this day the best interview I've ever given, and you did a great job helping me with that.
And I'll tell you what I really liked about that show I did with you is that when you came out the other side of that interview, you were different. Like your delivery, like you know, moment of honesty here, you weren't as manic.
Yeah.
Like something got worked out in that interview in terms of whatever you were kind of dealing with or holding on to.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember being really conscious during that interview, like, I just want to listen to Emily. I just want to hear what she has to say here. And I didn't even know why, but I knew it was important.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think things began to really kind of take off for you in a different kind of way after that. That was an important show, I think.
I would agree with you. I mean, I think it was time to a couple of things. I think that whole period of time, but that opportunity to speak about it with you in the way that I did, you know, resolved something for me, because there's a reason why I understand what's going on. And it's because I was, you know, I was at ground zero when that behavior really first began. Right. And so I understand, you know, so I needed to finally work through an issue that I had been dancing around and evading and running away from for most of my life. But also, like, I had all of these ways in which I could see that it extended out into wild things going on in the world. But I had never had to sit calmly and try to ground attach these things that sound like crazy ideas to something that was very real and obviously happening in a way that everybody, not just people who know the things that I know, could understand. And some, you know, I think you're a great interviewer. And so that helped me to be able to compress them into the thread that could go through the eye of the needle in a way that people could digest the message I was coming with. And I've had a different level of confidence in my ability to sort of in a grounded way start talking about my experiences instead of like in this just flitty all over the place way. Yeah,
no, you're doing great. And I'm really proud of you and all the work that you're doing and breaking new ground, and you're moving to Texas and a whole new world opening up for you. And so you're getting ready to make that leap on the balance beam right now.
Absolutely. And I had some great friends and teachers, and I'm glad to count you amongst them. So
yeah, well, we're glad you're here. I'm looking forward to you being here. It's going to be great.
Me too.
All right, everybody, we're out here for today. Thanks for being here, Chatlandia. You can find Emily Moyer. You got a website coming. Is it up yet?
The website will be up within weeks. In fact, I have a meeting in just a little bit about that. For now, you can find me on YouTube at Emily Moyer. I'm also backed up mostly on BitChute, but it doesn't work that great. You can find me at patreon.com/offplanetmedia. And then I also know that a lot of people who don't like Patreon, and I can't blame them. I now have a locals page for myself, emilymoyer.locals.com. And there is also a Project Kids locals page, and that's projectkids.locals.com. So
Okay.
There we go.
Great. All right, Emily. Thanks for being here. And I'll be back probably here on Sunday night, since this seems to be working. And Sunday night does not seem to be a very controversial show as far as YouTube goes. Although I did have the Vanessa Redgrave show pulled, but that had to do with a copyright thing. It had nothing to do with my content. I saw David Leo King. So I haven't talked to David in about a week, but I'm thinking maybe in 2 weeks, David and I will probably rally if he's up for it, but not this Sunday. It's a little bit late in terms of notice. So, but I'll reach out to David, and I know a lot of you guys like what we do together, and so do I. He's great.
He's my twin brother, apparently. Also,
apparently, there's a doppelganger effect going on. Emily, love you. You take care. Everybody else, we'll see you on Sunday night. Bye.
Bye, guys.